How do you get into a position where Donald Trump himself decides, hey, I want you to be the ambassador?
Stubbornness, force of will, making donations and helping candidates.
Did you ever get a chance to like get drinks with Peter Thiel or hang out with him?
I knew him reasonably well. He's like an amazingly bright person.
You've raised millions and millions of dollars. How do you do it?
For people who want to be entrepreneurs, there's good news and there's bad news. No matter how good it looks from the outside, every venture has insurmountable problems.
Before you became the ambassador, how exactly did you go from someone that went to school to someone that said, oh, I sold my company to Microsoft?
Well,
Trevor, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You are the former US ambassador to Austria. You've raised millions and millions of dollars. You've sold your companies to Mastercard and other huge companies. How do you do it? Like how do you even get into a position to do that? What happened?
Well, you forgot Microsoft. That was the first acquirer of one of my companies. There's a short answer and a long answer. But the short answer is just like stubbornness, force of will, and sticking with something until it works.
Right.
But there's a long answer, and luckily we have time. So you have to keep asking me questions, man. I'm not going to just give it all up on minute 2.
Right. Definitely. The most important thing for me is always, what I've noticed is when you become successful, it gets so much easier to become even more successful. You just have to have your first win, your first home run, and then using that momentum, you can really push and get to anywhere you want. But I guess we should go back to, the first moment of success you had before you became the ambassador, before you had, X amount under your belt, selling your company to Microsoft. How exactly did you go from, someone that went to school to someone that said, oh, I sold my company to Microsoft for millions of dollars? What was that, initial catalyst?
Well, for people who want to be entrepreneurs, I think there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is you really don't have to have any specific skill set. It's not like you had to go to Harvard or you had to have, worked for one of Elon's companies first or whatever. Like, you don't really need anything except the right mindset. And the right mindset is, once you pick your thing, you are dedicated to it to the end, and you absolutely refuse to fail, because very smart people have tried to be entrepreneurs, and every venture, no matter how good it looks from the outside, has insurmountable problems, terrible moments, and it's the people who just power through who ultimately are successful. So if you have that skill, or even if you can just build that resilience in yourself, you can be a great entrepreneur.
Well, it's easy to say that, but you did go to Princeton, Oxford, Berkeley. How much of your success can you attribute to, having a network, having that initial group of people that they're going to be willing to invest, they're going to be willing to help you out, they're going to give you the network that you need? Because wouldn't you say that's a big reason why you were able to grow so quickly, having these Ivy League connections?
Well, in the balance, any connection is helpful. But I don't think my success came from going to the world's top schools. I think my success came from something inside. In fact, if you read the Forbes list of the richest people, either in America or the world, a lot of them didn't go to Harvard. A lot of them went to Oklahoma State or whatever, right? Which tells us it isn't necessary to have that background. Sure, I live in the Bay Area. There's a Stanford network and people who know each other help each other. It's not that doesn't exist, but it isn't a prerequisite. It isn't necessary. And, I come from a really interesting family, and I have lots of relatives, and most of them are not successful entrepreneurs. It's not that They have the same genetics as me. They know the same people as me. It's something more than that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Is it like sort of this insatiable desire for more? Like, because you were born in a good family, you could have just like coasted off, like you could have just chilled your whole life basically. But you decided like you wanted to build empires in a way. You wanted to like work in the government as an ambassador. Do you just have like this pull inside of your heart to just keep getting more, or what kind of drives you to get there?
Yes. I mean, in a nutshell, like I am constantly thinking up ideas. I'm constantly kind of in a creative mode, and I have like pretty much a burning desire to make things happen, you know, to have achievements, to create things out of nothing. And it definitely is what drives me. You know, I started my first company when I was still at Berkeley as a grad student, and I was in my 20s. And I really had no idea what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to achieve, but I knew so little. But it didn't matter. Like I always say, like I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, The Matrix. But in The Matrix, like he just like sits in a helicopter and he's like, I need to download a program on how to fly a helicopter, right? Like in real time. That's what being an entrepreneur is like. It's not that you know everything when you start. It's that you learn how to learn. It's like you're sitting in that helicopter and you're like, I've got like 30 seconds to figure out how to fly this thing. That's what being an entrepreneur is like. It's, you know, you have to be crafty. You have to be resourceful. You have to use your whole brain, and it's really exciting. And for a lot of people, it's also scary and discouraging, and it's all of those things.
Okay, but be honest. Your first company, did you start it to impress a girl?
I did impress some girls, but no. I mean, when I was like 10 years old, I pretty much knew I didn't want to work for other people. I come from a family where I have a great-great-grandfather who founded a huge company, and I like kind of idolized him, and I wanted to be like him, and I wanted to have my own company, and I wanted to create my own things. I didn't want like a regular job. But what was frustrating is I didn't know how to do it. You know, I didn't know what it would be. I just knew that was the life I wanted for myself. And then figuring out, okay, what is my idea? How will I start it? How will I raise the money? What's the first thing I should do? All of that I had to figure out on my own. And that was kind of a lonely but exciting journey.
Mm-hmm. How did you raise money originally when you started your first company?
So when I came up with my first idea, which was a company called CompareNet, it was like an early e-commerce comparison shopping website. I had an idea, which is like so many places were trying to sell me things, but I felt like sometimes I didn't have enough information to just be like, yeah, I'll buy this one, or yeah, I'll buy that one. It's like I needed more like preparation, more research. And I was like, why isn't there like a commerce site that doesn't just help you, you know, pick where to buy, but also what to buy? Like if I want a flat screen TV, which one do I want? Like what's the right trade-off between price and features? And so that was the idea behind CompareNet. And when I came up with that idea, I was like, how do I make it happen? And I knew I needed a little bit of money. So I started with just friends and family, you know, like $100,000 to kind of kick it off. And then I just hired some people to kind of help me research. And then I was like off to the races.
Small loan of $100,000.
Wasn't a loan. It was an investment. And those people made many hundreds more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How do you get into a position where Donald Trump himself decides, hey, I want you to be the ambassador?
Well, it's a funny thing. So I had done a company, and one of my investors was a guy called Peter Thiel, who was very close with the first Trump administration, kind of advising them. And I had been kind of active in politics, like making donations and helping candidates. So I knew some of the people who were going into the administration. And then I also happened to be friends with the daughter of the president, Ivanka. And so it was a combination of those things. And there weren't a lot of people around the team at that time who were qualified for posts like being an ambassador. I had a degree in international relations from Oxford, and I was the grandson of an ambassador. I knew the role. In fact, I was unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So that means 100 senators who can never agree on anything agreed that I would be a good ambassador.
Jeez. Would you say the catalyst for that position was Peter Thiel kind of recommending you?
No, I think it was a combination of everything. I don't think it was any one thing. But I kind of feel like if you're intelligent and you're motivated, you should think of your life in kind of 5-year stints. And it's every 5 years or so, you should reinvent yourself or do something new or do something meaningful. And I was kind of at that point where I'd been running my company for a little while, and I was ready for a new challenge. And I thought this is a whole new thing I'll have to learn, diplomacy, how Washington works. And it was a perfect opportunity for me for more growth.
Did you ever get a chance to get drinks with Peter Thiel or hang out with him?
Yeah. I knew him reasonably well because at the time he was living he was actually my neighbor, but living in San Francisco, and he's investing in a lot of my friends' companies, and he's an amazingly bright person, very, very motivating.
Cool. When you were working as an ambassador to Austria, what is something about working in the government, working with, these, very serious people? What is something that kind of surprised you? You were like, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected at all.
Well, first of all, do you really know what ambassador does?
Vaguely. I know you just you don't really do, it's not really as demanding as other government positions, right?
It's actually incredibly demanding if you take the job seriously and you do it well. So in the U.S. Constitution, for the executive branch, there's only 3 positions that are mentioned: president, vice president, and emissary. Emissary is ambassador. And ambassadors were so important for the U.S. that they had the power to declare war. They could sign a peace treaty. They could bind the country with any treaty, because if you think about it, back in the day, it took a month to get a letter from Europe to Washington, and we didn't have that time. So ambassadors actually sit outside the regular power structure of Washington and technically report directly to the president. They're the president's personal emissary. And so when you're an ambassador in a country like Austria, where I was, the closest analogy is actually being the president, but in that country. So half your job is working with government agencies. You have to know what they do, what they care about. And I had 13 agencies represented in Vienna that reported to me, from Department of Agriculture to the FBI. And so you have to help them. But then the other half of the job is being the face of Washington in a country, meeting with the prime minister, the cabinet, the parliament, the media, religious leaders, student leaders, touring the country, going to meet the regional governors. And so it's a 7-day-a-week job, and it's you could be promoting a Marine one minute, meeting with the cardinal the next minute, or touring a factory, or hosting an event. So it's a really important job. And then you have to understand Washington, right? Because there's no red phone you can just pick up and say, get me the president. It's you have to figure out who's around the president. What is the power structure? What when you need something, how do you contact them? How does the Senate or the House represent the other interests? So it's a huge learning curve.
Jeez, do you get paid for that? I don't imagine you get paid as much for being an ambassador as much as you do running $1 million company.
You do not. There is a salary, but it's pretty small, and actually ambassadors often subsidize the post. So it costs me a lot of money out of my pocket to run that post, but it was totally worth it. I really think there's There's no bigger privilege than serving your country. And, the original ideal of America was that talented or capable people would kind of step in, serve, and then step back and go back to private life. And that was exactly what I did.
Mm-hmm. When you were put into that position, were you able to make any significant political changes that you're proud of? Is it possible at that level? Like, is there something you're proud of that you can say, I was in the government and I made an impact in a time there that lasted, is there something like that?
Many. And so in our system in the US, about a third of the ambassadors are not from the State Department, but they're chosen by the White House. And those people often come from business or other interesting careers. And it's actually really beneficial to the State Department. The State Department is huge. They have maybe 60, 70,000 extended employees. And so getting these people from business who understand like business objectives. In Silicon Valley, we use something called OKRs, like different ways you measure success. And so I brought that mentality to the embassy. And I had hundreds of people working for me there. And so I was like, what does great look like? How can we rock this thing, right? And if you kind of search online, you can see that my time there had a name. The Austrians called it Verbundenheit, which is kind of like the new closeness, because Austria is a neutral country and traditionally had been like almost equally separated or distanced between Russia and the US. And I like looked these people in the eye and I was like, you guys are part of the EU. You're in the center of Europe. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. You're not equally close to Russia. Like, we are the friends. We are the partners. And it was this era of new closeness. Actually, Austria became one of the 10 fastest growing trade partners and investors in the US. We had the most high level meetings, meaning like I took the Minister of Defense to the Pentagon. Their Prime Minister is the first in history to get 2 invitations to the Oval Office to meet the President. I had the Secretary of State there for 3 days. I was like, let's just kill this thing with closeness, and that was what we did.
Jeez. When Trump was running for office in 2016. He was frequently talking about something called the deep state, right? And then when he became president, he kind of stopped talking about it. When you were in power like that, when you were, working as an ambassador, did you feel like there were, people above you kind of telling you what to do? People above you saying, hey, like, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, where it wasn't exactly you making all the decisions, you were kind of taking orders from other people above you?
No one above me. But like a lot of the bureaucracy, yes. So I'll give you a couple examples. So, one example on the controversial side is like, I felt strongly that, okay, I'm President Trump's ambassador and it's my job to advance America's foreign policy along those lines. But I also was unanimously confirmed by the US Senate. So I felt like I have a responsibility to represent every American, right? And there was a policy at the time that came from somewhere in the State Department that US embassies abroad could not display the pride flag on the same pole as the US flag. They could hang it on the side of a building or whatever, but not on the pole. And I hadn't really thought deeply about it, but I knew there were some people at my embassy who were really bothered by that, like really offended. And it was like Pride Month or whatever. And I was like, I am the president's personal representative. I have like almost, but judiciously to use, but almost unlimited power at this mission in this country. And so I told my embassy, hang the pride flag on the pole with the U.S. flag. I think that's the appropriate thing to do. And so, like, could I have been fired for doing that? Possibly, but I wasn't, because it was the right thing to do, right? And no one above me, called me to the mat on that. But there were a lot of like bureaucrats who are entrenched, and they just think that it's their privilege to do whatever they want. And that's actually not the way the U.S. system works. The way the U.S. system works is voters pick their representatives, and their representatives are empowered to run the government, not the bureaucrats. And there were definitely times where I found there were bureaucrats who were resisting sometimes even dumb little things. But there is kind of like a deep state. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's people who think they know better.
How much of these bureaucrats, like, if you could, I guess it's a difficult question to answer, but how much of the government do you think is run by these unelected bureaucrats versus, people that we see in the public eye?
Well, there are millions of people who work for the federal government, and there are hundreds of people elected by, voters, right? So just do the math. And it's usually dumb things. Like, I'll give you an example. As you know, I am the first American in history to take his grandfather's ambassadorship, because my grandfather was also ambassador to Austria. And it's traditional when you move into the house, which is the residence, if you are willing to pay the bills, you can kind of redecorate it, right? And so I moved into the residence, which I had stayed in as a boy when it was my grandfather's residence, and was trying to quickly fix it up and paint the living room. And bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. told me, you cannot paint the living room brown. They were just steadfast. And I was like, do you want to see a photo of that room when it was brown with me standing in it as a 5-year-old? Because I have one. And when you say that, they crumble, right? What can they say? But that's just an example,
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's really interesting to speak to somebody that was on the inside and kind of saw it play out in real time. Right now, after you were the ambassador, and after you decided to retire from that and go back into entrepreneurship, you started a company that got millions of dollars in funding from people like David Sachs, the Winklevoss twins, Marc, Benioff, who did Salesforce, JetBlue Ventures. What was the process to get that funding? Is this at a stage of your life where you already have these connections and you can just call them and say, hey, starting this company, I want your support? Or do you still have to go through the basic process of whatever that process is?
Well, funding, depending on macroeconomics, the cycle, can be easier or harder, but you always have to start with a good idea. And so I founded a company called Kresus. And Kresus is actually named after a real person who lived in ancient Greece around 550 BC called King Kresus. And he created the first fungible coins. So every gold coin had exactly the same amount of metal. So he kind of created currency, and he literally changed the world. The arts, even democracy, came from this innovation. So I like the name Kresus. And I was looking at the blockchain. And today, everyone's focused on AI, but there's another innovation that I think is almost as important, which is the blockchain. And the blockchain isn't NFTs per se or altcoins. Blockchain is an immutable ledger paired with smart contracts. So immutable ledger means every event, whether it's a contract or an occurrence, is connected by all the computers networked around the world so that everyone knows it happened. No one can say it didn't. And it's memorialized forever. And these events that are immutable are connected to smart contracts. So the smart contracts, an automated way to say X, Y, and Z will happen upon this or that thing. And so it's destined to occur the way it's supposed to, right? And these are really powerful innovations. So I was I want to create a company that becomes the primary interface between humans and this thing called the blockchain. And right now, we're really focused on big businesses, enterprise, banks, big companies, because with regulatory changes, the Genius Act, more well-defined rules around what you can and can't do on the blockchain. Big companies are starting to think, I need a blockchain strategy. Could be we want to use a stable coin internally, externally. Might be we want to offer tokenized assets, or we even want to take our assets and we want to put them on chain and we want to tokenize them. Whatever it is, they're looking for like a trusted partner that understands their processes, how they work, their legal, their compliance, their reputation, how important it is, and that can build a digital platform and power it for them. And so Kresus right now is focused on this important segment of the market that's been kind of ignored, which is like, okay, I want a digital platform. I want to do something on chain. Who do I call? Who can build my proof of concept? Who can build the platform, skin it for me, run it, make sure it's safe and secure and compliant? Call Kresus.
Yeah, that's a big job to do, man. That's a lot of little things, and I'm sure there's a lot of like issues to tackle on the way to do that, like you said earlier.
Well, the funny thing about Web3 is like, because it was kind of a poorly regulated area. In fact, like under President Biden, it was so poorly regulated that they refused to even issue regulations. So there was so much uncertainty that there was very few players operating in the US. And so what happened is you kind of got all these like crypto bros on Caribbean islands, you know, avoiding US taxation, avoiding regulations. And that's kind of no way for like a proper industry to grow up. And it's not like what gives big enterprise confidence. So now there's an opportunity to be like US based, you know, legal, properly regulated, dot your I's, cross your T's, and do things correctly and be a really good partner. And, you know, this is the 6th company I founded. I sold my last company to Mastercard. I sold my first company to Microsoft. I know how to do these things in the proper way. And I think that's what kind of differentiates Kresus.
What was it like, by the way, selling your company to Microsoft? Like, did someone at Microsoft just send you an email and you had a meeting? Or like, what is the process of that?
It was absolutely insane. So I had a co-founder, and we had been talking to Amazon and Microsoft. And I always say, like, building a company is kind of like blowing up a balloon. You want to make it as full and as large as possible and tie it off before it pops. So sometimes you can take that balloon public and it just keeps blowing up forever. Sometimes you want to sell it at the right time. That's part of the art. And I felt like that was the moment where it needed a bigger partner, more traffic, more eyeballs, more, and so it was the moment. And Microsoft was doing a bunch of clever stuff, but the negotiations were incredibly complex. It had to be closed on a certain date because Bill Gates was going to go on stage at a big event and he wanted to announce it. So it was then or nothing. My board wouldn't let me announce it until the deal was closed because they didn't want the company to be vulnerable. I had one investor that owned a small amount that wouldn't sign off on stuff because they didn't like one small legal thing. And like I had to convince employees to move to Seattle from San Francisco or the deal would fall through. And like I literally lost all the hair on my head. And like it turned out that like the first date we could sign the deal was the same date that the deal should be announced. And so our lawyers actually like camped out in Sacramento, California at the Secretary of State's office. And that office opened at like 8:30 a.m. And they were like the first in the door and they got the thing stamped. And then at like 9:15 a.m., it was publicly announced.
Jeez. So they didn't just like text you and say, here's $25 million, but give me your company. Like they basically made you go through kind of a roller coaster.
It's always that way. Like it actually doesn't really matter how successful you are or your reputation. Like every new business has its challenges and complexity. And it like, in some ways it gets easier. Like it's maybe easier to raise money and stuff, but in a lot of ways it never gets easier because you have to stay current. You have to know what's new. Like every new thing has its challenges, and it's always humbling.
Mm-hmm. What is it like working with sort of the elite of America? What makes their mindset different? What makes their work ethic different compared to the average person?
Well, I've always said, like, I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I'm just very lucky that I'm often in the room with very, very, very smart people. And so it's like, it's fun to know them, fun to observe them. They process information incredibly quickly. They are well-read and knowledgeable. They understand and can talk about lots and lots of things. They have a vision and they have conviction. They think big. They're decisive. They are unafraid, unapologetic. And pretty much all of the ones that I know, which are probably most of the ones you would read about, they're not motivated by money. They are motivated by, like, really big ideas, by changing the world, by making the impossible happen, by they are just profound thinkers who want to do really profound things.
Would you say that the best entrepreneurs and the most important businessmen and investors, they're powered by ideology more than money?
I would. And by the way, there's no shame in, like, wanting to make money. It's a healthy impulse for a lot of reasons. But I just think these really incredible people, they're just less motivated by that than they just have, like, a really, really, really long-term vision. Like I always say, like, did Jeff Bezos think when he started Amazon years and years ago, and it was just a website for rare books, did he think someday he would buy his own aircraft and ship his own stuff and not use, UPS or FedEx or whatever, but create his own distribution system with his own aircraft? I'd like to think he did think that he was thinking so far in advance. But who knows, right?
We'll have to ask him.
We'll have to ask him. You'll have to have him on your podcast, right?
Yeah. That's actually crazy. So you think that, would you say that's kind of like, not to use like 13-year-old girl terminology, but would you say that's kind of like manifesting what you're trying to achieve? Like visualizing what you want, and even from like, even 10 years, 15 years, 20 years away, you have this one vision, and that is kind of what brings people to achieve these crazy goals.
Without a doubt. Like, you have to manifest. You have to have that. And the other thing I would say is, like, you can be religious or you can be metaphysical or whatever, but, like, however you want to say it, I feel like the universe, like, brings you what you need when you need it. You just have to pay attention. Like, I'll give you an example. I was doing a company. It was a really good company, but we were basically out of money, and I was having a really hard time raising money. And it was very scary and discouraging. And my mom, like, wanted to go to the opera, and she called me and she's like, "Will you go with me?" And I didn't really want to do it. Like, it was black tie. I put on a tuxedo and just wasn't really, my mind was so consumed with these problems. But, it's like, I want to be a good son and stuff. So I was like, "Sure, Mom, I'll be your date to the opera." And, like, we went to the opera, and it was like intermission, and we're getting a drink, and I'm talking to this guy, very polite, nice guy. And turns out that he had a fund, and they were investing, and he's like, "Tell me what you're doing." And he ended up, like, giving me exactly the money that I needed for that company to literally survive. And I could tell you, like, 10 stories like that, where just random coincidence, like, or was it? But I was paying attention is the thing. I was, like, focused, and I was listening, and I was, and there also probably been times when I wasn't paying attention and should have. But that's, like, a life lesson that I've picked up on the way, is, like, you got to pay attention,
You have to go in 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
But I'm having so much fun.
Yeah, I like this a lot. This is actually very interesting to talk about. Like honestly, I wanted to ask. So it sounds like a lot of your stories, a lot of what you say, it especially with the people, right? You put yourself in a position where you were lucky, you were by coincidence, you got what you needed. But at the end of the day, you needed to have access to like these networks. You needed to be in the opera in the first place, right? Like the average person that, is middle class, they're not going to be in an opera in the first place. Would you say for like a 20-year-old that's trying to become successful, they should invest a lot of time and effort into becoming someone that is in these circles in the first place? Is that a big priority for these people?
Well, I think to phrase it a different way, your network is your most important asset. So everyone should focus on building out their network. And you never know where you meet people. You could, meet them at the coffee shop or the whatever. But like I always tell younger people, anytime you meet anyone, like connect with them, add them to your LinkedIn, get their cell phone number, connect with them on Instagram, like whatever, because you just never know who's going to go where. And so always be building your network. If you don't go to Stanford or whatever, like just pay attention. Like interesting people are always around that maybe they're giving a talk somewhere or, go show up on campus and go to the class where they're talking like, after a talk, always go up to the podium, shake someone's hand, introduce yourself, ask them if you can connect with them. Like, if you don't put yourself out there, you don't get the return. And you like everyone has their own set of cards to play. No one has zero cards. So just figure out like what you have to play and start playing your hand, right? Just because I was like born into an interesting family doesn't mean that I just instantly had all these connections. I mean, my parents are wealthy and influential, but they don't know any of the people who I rely on in my career. It's just they live in different circles, right? So these networks I've built myself, like through my personality and my ambitions and my effort. When I was a U.S. ambassador living in Europe, I used to say like, I am a believer in the American dream. And the American dream is very simple. It just says that no matter where you're from, no matter what your background, any person can change the world. Like any person. We all have the right to believe that if we really, really want to do something, we can do it. And in Silicon Valley, that's the prevailing mentality. Like you meet some 20-year-old who's like, I want to do this or I want to do that. There's no reason to believe they won't be successful. Not to say it won't be really, really hard, but in Europe and other places, people don't believe that they can change the world. They just don't fundamentally believe it. Here we do. So I always say like our gift to the world is the American dream. It's like we want everyone to believe that they can change the world and they don't need to be from any background. They can do it. That's like what we try to gift to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, Trevor, I appreciate your time. I know you got to go, but it's been a pleasure. I guess if you have any closing statements, if there's any message you want to give, my audience, it's young people in their early mid-20s that are focused on kind of becoming a new elite in themselves. Not all of them are, entrepreneurs yet. A lot of them are investors. A lot of them are people that are really trying to rise the ranks and become people that are in government, that are in places of power, that are ideological. You gave a very good statement prior, so I don't want you to repeat yourself. But is there anything else you would like to tell my audience on how they can, essentially become these people that are put in the right place at the right time, that are, actual people that have power to change the world?
Sure. So I think I'd say a couple of things. The first thing is be honest with yourself. Like what are your deepest dreams, wishes, desires? Like, are you the kind of person who wants that? Because it's it's an amazing life. It's also a hard life, right? It requires 24/7 effort. You can't just go home at 6 p.m. and turn off the job and not think about it or not work on the weekend or whatever. You have to be ready to give everything. So are you that person? And if you are that person, then why don't you like work on your own life plan? Like what would amazing look like? Like really think big. It could take years, right? But like what's your fondest dream? Like get it down on paper or wherever, and then just work backwards. Like, you know, it could take a decade, 2 decades, doesn't matter. There's no reason to believe you can't achieve it if you want, right? Build the networks, get the experience, whatever it takes, just believe it. And then the other thing I would say is, I do believe everyone should understand the blockchain because it will change everything. So we have an app, Kresus, it's Kresus, App Store and Google. Like download it. You don't even have to buy any crypto, but just like get familiar with the blockchain, because I honestly believe people are so focused on AI right now and they don't understand this second revolution, which is going to like find its way into every technology and also create a lot of opportunity.
Thank you for your time, Trevor. I have all of Trevor's links below. Kresus, his LinkedIn, everywhere you can connect with them and see what he's doing. And I look forward to potentially seeing you in Miami. Let's build a new elite. Nice to see you, Trevor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a great time, and I hope something here was interesting for someone who's paying attention.